The storm had rolled in faster than anyone on the mountain expected. One moment the Colorado sky was a hard, pale blue stretched over ancient peaks, and the next the wind began cutting through the air like sharpened blades. Snow churned upward in furious spirals, swallowing entire ridgelines until the world looked like it had been erased by a giant hand. Along the distant foothills stood Hale Ranch, a massive stretch of land carved from generations of grit and cowboy pride. Even in the storm, its fences ran straight and strong. Its barns held firm against the wind, and its reputation remained untouched. One of the last great empires of the Mountain West. People around these parts said the Hale name carried the same weight as the mountains themselves. But miles away from that sturdy refuge, Ayanna Nietzsche was running out of time. Ayanna had always trusted the land. She was Apache, raised to read the whisper of pine needles, the pattern of animal tracks, the tilt of distant clouds. She had studied wildlife biology back east, but her heart still belonged to the wind-scoured plains and deep canyons her ancestors once walked. She had come to Colorado on invitation from the State Conservation Board, ready to begin a research project on the struggling mountain wolf population. It was the kind of work she lived for, part science, part instinct, part prayer. But no amount of knowledge could quiet the unease tugging at her now. The research team's truck had vanished beneath a wave of snow when the storm hit with brutal force. One moment it was rolling over a frozen service road, the next it was tossed sideways like a child's toy. When she crawled out the back window, half dazed and covered in frost, her colleagues were nowhere in sight, scattered or driven off course by the blinding whiteout. Now she was alone. The wind tore at her coat, whipped her long dark hair across her face, and bit into every inch of exposed skin. The sky was nothing but a furious blur of white, the ground nearly indistinguishable from the air. But Ayanna had learned long ago that panic only fed the storm. She stopped, closed her eyes, let the cold sting her cheeks like needles. Listen to the wind, it always knows where it came from. Her grandfather's voice echoed softly through memory. She turned her head, letting the howl of the blizzard sweep past her left ear. The wind carried faint hints of the ridgeline, open plains to the east, heavy rock walls to the west. She needed to move with the drift, not against it. She took a breath, then another. Her boots crunched through layers of snow as she pushed forward, counting her steps, studying how the flakes hit the ground. Watch the snow, it falls differently near shelter. But the cold was sinking deeper, paralyzing her fingers and numbing her thoughts. Her breaths were turning shallow, her vision narrowing. She had maybe half an hour before her body started shutting down. Maybe less. Her foot sank suddenly into a deeper drift and she stumbled, barely catching herself. Ayanna forced her mind to stay awake, to cling to every detail, the faint slope of the ground, the distant rumble that might have been thunder or hooves. She frowned. Hooves? At first it was only a vibration in the air, but then she heard it clearly, a heavy, powerful rhythm cutting through the storm. She turned, squinting against the barrage of snow. A shadow emerged, then another. A horse, dark as midnight, and moving with a confidence that seemed unreal in such a storm. And on its back sat a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy winter coat and oilskin duster, snow clinging to him like a second skin. His hat was pulled low, but when he guided the horse closer, she caught the sharp glint of his eyes, cold, focused, unshaken by the chaos around them. Jackson Hale. She didn't know his name yet, but Colorado surely did. Owner of Hale Ranch. Rancher with more land than a man could ride in a week. A figure people spoke about in lowered voices, half respect, half awe. He rode toward her like something carved from the mountain itself. "You're a long way from shelter," he shouted over the wind, his voice low and edged with gravel. Ayanna tried to speak, but her lips were stiff. The storm had stolen her strength faster than she realized. Jackson didn't hesitate. He swung off the saddle in one fluid motion, boots sinking into the snow. Without a word, he wrapped an arm around her waist. Steady, strong, radiating enough warmth to make her knees weaken. Before she could protest, he lifted her effortlessly and settled her onto the horse. Then he climbed up behind her, one arm securing her against his chest, the other gripping the reins. "Hold on," he murmured near her ear. The horse surged forward, cutting through the white world like an arrow. And in that instant, pressed close against a stranger in the heart of a deadly storm, Ayanna felt something shift deep inside her. A beginning neither of them saw coming. The ride back through the blizzard felt unreal, like drifting through a half-lit dream. Ayanna didn't remember much, only the steady warmth of Jackson Hale behind her, the rhythm of the horse beneath them, and the way her frozen fingers slowly regained feeling as he shielded her from the wind. When the storm finally thinned, the outline of a massive structure appeared through the swirling white. Not a simple cabin, not a ranger outpost. This was Hale Ranch, solid timber, stone chimneys, and roofs built to withstand anything the mountains threw their way. Flames glowed behind window panes and smoke curled upward, carrying the scent of burning pine. Jackson guided the horse into a covered stable and helped her down. The moment her boots hit the ground, her legs buckled. He caught her by the arms, steadying her with hands that were surprisingly gentle for a man with his reputation. "Easy," he muttered. Inside the main lodge, warmth engulfed her instantly. The crackle of a wood-burning hearth filled the room. Shadows danced across walls made of thick lodgepole pine, and the air carried the earthy smell of leather, cedar, and hay, so different from the sterile labs she usually worked in. He led her to the guest quarters off the main hall. It was simple but welcoming. A thick quilt on the bed, old Navajo rugs across the floor, shelves filled with books about ranching, land management, and wildlife conservation. Ayanna paused at the doorway, absorbing the unfamiliar world she'd just stepped into. To her, Hale Ranch felt like stepping back in time, into a place where the land ruled men, not the other way around. Jackson cleared his throat. "You sit, I'll get the medic kit." His voice was deep, controlled. The kind of voice that told her he didn't talk much unless he had to. Ayanna nodded, still shivering. He returned with a thermos of hot tea and a wool blanket. She wrapped herself tightly, watching him as he sat across from her. The firelight sharpened the lines of his jaw, highlighted a faint scar near his temple. They didn't speak at first. Both were guarded. Two people who had learned to survive by keeping parts of themselves hidden. Finally, Jackson broke the silence. "What were you doing up there alone?" "My team got separated," she said. "The storm came too fast." "Storms on this mountain usually do," he replied. "They don't give warnings." She studied him carefully. His expression was unreadable, almost cold. But beneath it, she sensed something else. Fatigue, maybe. Hurt. A weight she couldn't yet name. "You know these lands well," she said softly. He shrugged. "I grew up here. The mountain teaches you things." "So did my people," she answered. "The land speaks. If you listen." His eyes flicked toward her, sharp, curious. But he didn't comment. Ayanna reached for the tea and noticed a framed photograph on the shelf behind him. A younger Jackson stood beside a horse, smiling with a brightness she hadn't seen tonight. His posture was relaxed, easy, alive in a way the man in front of her wasn't. She hesitated. "On that picture, that was you?" He stiffened almost imperceptibly. "A long time ago." "You look different," she murmured. He didn't respond, but the silence was heavy. She'd heard whispers already, even before arriving in Colorado. Stories travelers shared around campfires about the wealthy rancher who survived an accident years ago. The kind that broke more than just bone. Rumors of how he wasn't the same afterward, and how no woman, no matter how determined, had ever been able to give him a family. Ayanna didn't repeat the rumor, but it hung between them like smoke. To break the tension, she shifted the conversation back to work. "My research, it focuses on land-based wolf packs. Their numbers have dropped dramatically." At that, something changed in his expression. Not warmth exactly, but interest, real interest. "You can read wolves?" he asked. "They're not hard to understand," she replied. "Their tracks, their patterns, the way they move, they tell you everything." Jackson leaned back, studying her with a new kind of attention. Most scientists he'd met were all theory, no instinct. But Ayanna, she carried both. The mountain recognized her, and she recognized it back. "You're not like the others they've sent," he finally said. "And you're not like the ranchers they warned me about," she countered. A corner of his mouth lifted, barely, almost a smile. For a brief, fragile moment, the storm outside felt distant. The room seemed smaller, the fire warmer, and the silence between them less empty. Something had shifted. It wasn't attraction yet, not trust, but it was the beginning of something, and both of them felt it. The storm passed overnight, leaving the mountains washed in silver light. By morning, the world seemed reborn, clean, crisp, and eerily quiet. Ayanna stepped outside the guest house wrapped in a thick jacket, breath rising in soft clouds, the cold biting at her cheeks in a way that felt oddly familiar. This time, she wasn't wandering through danger. She had a purpose. The Wildlife Conservation Center sat on the far edge of Hale Ranch, part research station, part sanctuary. The building was rustic but functional, with wide windows overlooking endless ridges. From here, she could observe everything: wolf trails curling across open snowfields, wild horses galloping in the distance, and bald eagles circling against the pale sky. For Ayanna, it was perfect. She moved through the snow, kneeling to inspect tracks, brushing frost off stones, listening to the faint calls echoing through the valley. Every sound mattered, every pattern meant something. Her scientific training blended naturally with her Apache instincts, two worlds woven together like threads of the same story. When she crouched to measure the depth of a fresh print, she whispered, "Female wolf, heavy with winter fat, moving fast." Behind her, a low voice answered, "You read that from one print?" She turned. Jackson Hale stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, hat tipped low against the sun. His breath fogged the air in slow, steady trails. She hadn't heard him approach. He nodded toward the ground. "My men couldn't figure that much out with a whole set of tracks." Ayanna shrugged gently. "The land talks. Most people just don't listen." His eyes held hers a moment too long. Then he motioned toward the stables. "Come on, thought you might want to see the horses." The stables were buzzing with morning activity, cowboys brushing coats, tightening saddles, checking hooves. The earthy smell of hay and warm animals filled the air. Jackson led her inside, stopping beside a tall bay mare. "Mountain horses are different," he explained, resting a hand on the mare's neck. "They're smart. They feel your fear before you do." Ayanna reached out slowly. The mare sniffed her fingers before nudging its muzzle into her palm. Jackson raised an eyebrow. "She doesn't take to strangers easily. Maybe she knows I'm not here to harm her," Ayanna replied softly. He gave a quiet, surprised laugh. It was the first time she'd heard it. Deep, warm, as if it had been buried for years. A passing ranch hand nearly dropped a saddle when he saw. "Boss is laughing," the cowboy muttered. "Somebody write that down." Jackson shot him a warning look, but the cowboy only grinned. Ayanna couldn't help smiling. Over the next few days, Jackson kept appearing, never announcing himself, never staying long, but always close enough that she noticed. He showed her how to ride the mountain trails without spooking the horses. He pointed out old logging paths and hidden creeks only locals knew. Sometimes, when she was lost in her fieldwork, she'd turn and find him watching from a distance, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Whatever his reasons, his presence was becoming a quiet constant. Their moments together weren't grand, just small sparks, subtle shifts that pulled their worlds nearer. One afternoon, they knelt side by side studying a fresh set of wolf prints. Their shoulders brushed lightly, or perhaps it was just the wind nudging them closer. Still, neither moved away. Another time, she slipped on a patch of ice near a ridge. Jackson reached out instinctively, his hand gripping her forearm, steady and sure. The contact lasted only a heartbeat, but something inside her trembled, not with fear, but with awareness. And one evening, when a sudden drop in temperature forced them to build a small fire near the trail, they sat with palms outstretched toward the flames. Their hands were inches apart, the glow outlining every breath between them. They didn't speak, but the silence was full. For a moment, the mountain felt still. For a moment, it seemed possible that two very different lives might fit together. But the world has a way of reminding people of their place. Ayanna heard it when she walked past the barn that night. Two ranch hands talking in low voices. "Victoria Morrison's coming back next week," one said. "Guess the engagement's happening for real this time." "Big move for the ranch," the other replied. "The Morrison family's money could buy Hale every water right he needs." Ayanna froze. Engagement, Victoria, Jackson. There it was, the line between their worlds drawn clean and undeniable. She stepped back into the cold, the night suddenly sharper, heavier. A voice inside her whispered, "Cowboys with empires don't belong with women like you." And for the first time since she arrived at Hale Ranch, the mountains felt farther away. The firelight between her and Jackson, everything they hadn't spoken out loud, dimmed to a faint glow. Two worlds, almost touching, and yet impossibly far apart. Night settled over Hale Ranch in a calm, lingering hush. The sky above the mountains stretched wide and clear, sprinkled with stars that looked close enough to touch. The storm from days before felt like a memory now, softened by the warmth of crackling fires and the steady rhythm of ranch life. Ayanna stood near the corral fence, watching the horses settle down for the night. Their breaths rose like steam, drifting lazily into the darkness. She loved these quiet hours, when the world felt wide yet steady, when the land whispered instead of roared. She didn't hear Jackson approach. His boots crunched softly in the frost behind her. Couldn't sleep either? She turned, catching the dim glow of lantern light on his face. He looked worn, tired in a way that went deeper than a long day's work. The weight he carried clung to his shoulders like an old injury that never healed right. "No," she replied. "The night is too alive for sleeping?" He gave a faint nod. For a moment they simply stood there, listening to the horses rustle in their stalls. Then Jackson spoke, quiet, as if afraid the night might break apart if he raised his voice. "There's something I haven't told you." Ayanna shifted toward him. "I'm listening." He kept his eyes on the ground. 8 years ago, there was an accident, a bad one. A long breath. Doctors told me afterward that I couldn't have children. Silence stretched between them, heavy as snowfall. He swallowed, voice growing rough. "I've spent years pretending I'm fine with it, that running this ranch is enough. But the truth?" His voice cracked, raw and exposed. "I'm terrified I'll spend the rest of my life riding these fences alone. Terrified this land ends with me." When he finally met her eyes, they were burning. A mix of shame, grief, and a vulnerability she'd never seen from him. Ayanna stepped closer, her heart beat loud in her ears. "Jackson," she said softly, "being a man isn't measured by what blood you pass on." He looked at her, almost startled. "In my people's way," she continued, "legacy is not just a child. It's the land you protect, the lives you touch, the spirit you leave behind." Her voice was calm but firm. "What you nurture becomes your descendant too." His breath hitched, just barely, but enough for her to feel the shift. Under the vast western sky, something deep and unspoken connected them. Ayanna could feel it in the cold air between them, in the way his eyes softened, in the tension that hovered like a held breath. Jackson stepped closer, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his irises. Ayanna's pulse quickened. Her chest rose and fell too fast, too uneven. He reached toward her, fingers brushing her cheek, tentative, searching. Her lips parted. Heat bloomed between them, sharp and fragile. The stars above seemed to lean in, holding the moment still. If either of them moved a fraction closer, their mouths would meet. It would have been a first kiss carved into memory. A kiss born of storms and survival and stolen quiet nights. But fate, as always, had its own ideas. A sudden shrill whinny tore through the silence. Jackson jerked his head toward the stables. A silhouette stepped into the lantern light. Victoria Morrison. Coat trimmed with fur. Boots spotless. Chin raised high in entitlement. The kind of cold beauty the newspapers loved. Sharp, polished, untouchable. Her eyes flicked from Jackson to Ayanna, then back to Jackson again. "Well," she drawled, letting the cold seep into every syllable, "seems I arrived at just the right time." Ayanna stepped back instinctively, walls rising inside her. Victoria's gaze sharpened like a blade. "So this is the wildlife expert everyone keeps whispering about." Her smile curled, venomous. "I didn't realize the ranch was hiring charity cases from the reservations." Jackson stiffened. "Victoria!" She cut him off with a flick of her hand. "Honestly, Jackson, I expected more refined company from you. Not." Her eyes swept over Ayanna like inspecting dust. "Tribal strays." Ayanna felt the sting, but she didn't flinch. Still, the moment that had almost bloomed between her and Jackson shriveled in the sudden cold. Victoria stepped closer to him, possessive, territorial. "Your father always said you'd marry someone who could elevate this ranch," she said sweetly. "Not drag it down." Ayanna turned away before Jackson could answer. The stars above were still bright, still beautiful, but to her the night suddenly felt colder than any storm. The next few days passed under a strange tension, quiet, brittle, like the air before a lightning strike. Jackson spent most of his time in meetings with ranch investors and water rights representatives, leaving Ayanna to her work at the conservation center. She tried to focus on wolf tracks and migration charts, but something felt off. The air around the ranch had changed, and Victoria Morrison had not made another scene, which in itself was the biggest warning of all. It happened late in the afternoon. Ayanna returned to the conservation center after checking a distant ridgeline. The door to the lab hung halfway open. Cold air blew through the gap. She froze. Something was wrong. Inside, the lab was wrecked. Papers scattered, samples overturned, equipment smashed against the concrete floor. The scent of chemicals hung sharp in the air. Her laptop was missing. The cabinets had been pried open. Then she saw her backpack, dumped on the table, unzipped as if someone had pawed through it. Her stomach dropped. Before she could step forward, a voice echoed behind her. "Well, well," Victoria drawled, leaning against the doorway. "Someone's been very busy." Ayanna's pulse hammered. "What did you do?" Victoria lifted a memory card between two manicured fingers, letting the light catch it. "I'd worry less about me and more about what the cameras caught. Terrible thing. Sabotage. Especially when you're the only one around with access." The accusation struck like a blow. Ayanna clenched her fists. "You set this up." "Oh, sweetheart," Victoria said with a smirk. "I don't set things up. I simply redirect what's already falling apart." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You should have stayed in whatever dusty little corner of Arizona you came from. Women like you don't belong on land like this." Before Ayanna could respond, a group of ranch security men stormed in. "There," Victoria pointed. "Search her things." Ayanna's breath caught as two guards rifled through her backpack and pulled out the missing data drive, the one containing weeks' worth of research. She stared at the device in disbelief. She had never touched it, never even seen it removed. But Victoria had, and now the trap slammed shut. Minutes later, she was marched across the ranch grounds toward the main lodge. Workers stopped what they were doing. Cowboys paused mid-task. Everyone watched as the woman they'd accepted among them was dragged forward like a criminal. Jackson stood on the front steps with several investors, talking in low voices. When he saw the guards bringing her in, his face went pale beneath the brim of his hat. "Ayanna?" he breathed. One of the guards spoke before she could. "Sir, we found stolen research data in her possession, and the lab was destroyed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ayanna stood tall, rigid, trying to hold back the tremor in her voice. "I didn't do this." Her eyes locked on Jackson's, searching, pleading, not for mercy, but for belief. For the first time since she arrived at Hale Ranch, Jackson looked unsure of what he knew. The board members whispered urgently. One of the older investors stepped forward. "Jackson, this is serious. If she compromised your research center, we could be facing lawsuits, insurance claims, loss of federal funding, and the Morrison Partnership," another added sharply. "You defend her now, you jeopardize everything." Victoria stepped into view behind the group, expression carefully shaped into concern. "This ranch needs stability, Jackson, not emotional distractions." Ayanna felt the knife in those words, but she refused to bend. She kept her eyes on Jackson, silently asking, "Do you know me at all?" Jackson's jaw clenched. His throat worked. He looked like a man torn clean in two. Finally, he said the words that shattered everything. "I can't protect you right now." The world dimmed, not from shame. She'd faced humiliation before. But because the man who held her heart, the man who had almost kissed her under the stars, had just stepped away. Ayanna felt her chest tighten, but she didn't let a single tear fall. Apache women did not cry in front of their enemies. She simply nodded once, sharp, controlled, and turned away. She packed her few things into her truck as night settled over the mountains. Snowflakes drifted from a sky too calm for what she felt inside. She didn't look back at the ranch house, the stables, or the ridge where she had begun to imagine a future. The engine roared to life. The headlights cut through the darkness. Ayanna Nietzsche drove off into the cold, her silhouette swallowed by the night, leaving behind the man who had saved her life, and then broke her heart with a single sentence. The night Ayanna left, the mountains went silent, too silent for Hale Ranch. Jackson stood on the porch long after the sound of her truck had faded into nothing. Snow settled on his coat and hat, but he didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared into the darkness where her taillights had vanished. When he finally walked inside, the ranch felt hollow. The fire crackled, but it didn't warm him. The whiskey burned his throat, but it didn't numb him. Every corner of the lodge echoed with memories he hadn't realized he'd made. Her soft laugh by the fire pits, the way she traced wolf tracks with her fingertips, the way her eyes softened when she looked at the horses. Now she was gone, and he had been the one to let her go. For 3 nights, Jackson barely slept. He wandered the ranch like a ghost, boots dragging through the frost, eyes dull, jaw unshaven. The men tried not to stare, but they whispered among themselves. "Never seen the boss like this. Looks like a man who lost more than he can say. Every time Jackson attempted to work, his hands shook. He'd pick up a ledger only to drop it again. Conversations with investors blurred. The world around him kept moving, but he remained stuck in that moment. Ayana's face when he told her he couldn't protect her. He replayed it over and over. Her silence, her pain, her dignity, and her leaving. Whiskey became his closest companion, bottle after bottle emptied on the oak table. But all it did was sharpen the ache. On the fourth day, Cole showed up at Jackson's door before sunrise. Old Cole had worked on the ranch longer than anyone else. Broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, eyes that missed nothing. The kind of man who treated truth like a duty. Without knocking, he pushed his way in. "You look like hell," Cole said, taking in Jackson's unshaven face and scattered bottles. Jackson didn't answer. He just poured another drink. Cole exhaled a long, heavy breath. "I've been doing some digging about the mess in the conservation center." Jackson froze mid-pour. Cole opened a small notebook, tapping it with 2 fingers. "Turns out this ain't the first time Victoria Morrison pulled something like this." That got Jackson's attention. He turned, eyes narrowing. "Explain." Cole flipped a page. 3 years ago in Utah, one of the Morrison enterprises had an environmental consultant accused of data tampering. Charges dropped mysteriously. A beat. Rumor is Victoria planted the evidence herself. Jackson's blood ran cold. Cole wasn't finished. "And that pregnancy she's been parading to the board? That ain't yours." Found out she's been seeing someone in Denver. A lawyer. Ranch staff saw him sneaking around when she stayed here last summer. The whiskey glass slipped from Jackson's hand, shattering on the floor. Cole stepped closer, voice low. "There's more. A housemaid in the lodge. Lily. She saw Victoria near the lab the night before it was trashed. Victoria threatened her to keep quiet." Jackson's throat tightened. Why didn't she come forward? She's scared. Victoria told her she'd ruin her family. Everything in Jackson's world tilted, every thread connected, every lie unmasked. His breath grew ragged as the truth slammed into him. Victoria wasn't just cruel. She'd orchestrated everything. She'd destroyed the lab. She'd stolen the data. She'd framed Ayana. And he had believed her. Rage surged like wildfire. Shame, sharper than any blade, followed it. With a roar, Jackson grabbed the nearest whiskey bottle and hurled it across the room. It exploded against the stone fireplace, amber liquid spraying like blood. He pressed both hands to his face, trembling. A sound ripped from his chest, something between a growl and a cry. Cole stood there silent, letting him break. When Jackson finally lifted his head, his eyes were no longer dull. They burned. "I let her walk away," he said hoarsely. "I sent her out there alone." Cole nodded. "Then you better fix it before it's too late." Jackson grabbed his coat from the chair, shoving his arms through the sleeves with violent urgency. "Where would she go?" Cole shrugged. "If she was heading back toward Arizona, she'll pass through Grand Junction. Past that, she's gone." Jackson didn't hesitate. He strapped on his boots, grabbed his hat, and marched toward the door. Cole called after him. "The board won't like this. The Morrisons will declare war. You'll lose everything." Jackson paused only long enough to spit out one sentence. "I don't care if the whole damn country turns against me. I'm bringing her back." And with that, he plunged into the cold dawn. A cowboy with nothing left to lose, and one woman he would cross every mountain to find. The helicopter blades tore through the cold morning air, slicing the sky into furious circles. Snow lifted in spirals across the landing pad as the pilot shouted over the roar. "Hold on tight, Hale. Winds up here are mean as hell today." Jackson barely heard him. His fingers dug into the metal handles beside his seat, knuckles white. His chest heaved with uneven breaths. He'd faced angry bulls, wild storms, and men twice his size trying to take him down. But nothing, not a single danger on these mountains, had ever scared him the way the thought of losing Ayana did. His eyes burned from days without sleep. His jaw clenched so hard it trembled. Every mile of that frantic flight felt like a lifetime. The pilot finally pointed toward a stretch of civilization beyond the foothills. "Grand Junction Municipal Airport, straight ahead." Jackson leaned forward, heart slamming against his ribs. "Please, let her still be there. Just this once. Let me catch up." The helicopter touched down hard, skidding slightly. Before the blades stopped spinning, Jackson jumped out, boots slamming onto the asphalt, snow still clinging to his coat. He pushed through the terminal doors, breathless, ignoring the startled looks from travelers and staff. People stared, some whispering, some gawking, at the rugged cowboy storming through with a desperation that didn't fit clean, modern spaces. He scanned the room like a man searching for life itself. And then he saw her, Ayanna, sitting alone near gate 12, a worn coat wrapped around her shoulders, a duffel bag at her feet. She looked exhausted, eyes shadowed, lips pressed thin, but still carried that unmistakable dignity. Her back was straight, her chin lifted. She looked like a warrior resting between battles. Beautiful, proud, unbroken. Jackson's breath caught. He walked forward slowly at first, then faster until he was standing right in front of her. Her eyes widened, shock flickering across her face. Jackson? He opened his mouth, but words failed him. His throat closed, burning with everything he should have said days ago. So he did the only thing left to do. With dozens of strangers watching, Jackson Hale dropped to his knees, right there on the airport floor. Gasps rippled through the terminal. A child tugged his mother's sleeve. A couple paused mid-conversation. A businessman lowered his phone, mouth open. Ayanna froze. Jackson's voice cracked as he looked up at her. Ayanna, I'm sorry. His breath trembled. I was blind. I let fear and pressure take over, and I hurt you worse than any storm ever could. People slowed their steps, gathering around, but he didn't care. The world could burn for all he cared. There was only her. I was wrong, he whispered, about everything. Please, give me a chance to make it right. Ayanna stared down at him, hurt flickering behind her steady gaze. Her voice was soft, but the words cut deep. You didn't believe me, she said, when I needed you most. Jackson closed his eyes. Those words hurt more than any punch he'd ever taken. She continued, you trusted a lie over me, over what we had. I know, he choked, and I will spend every day proving I'll never make that mistake again. Silence fell between them. Not empty, heavy, a silence full of questions. What does trust mean? What does forgiveness cost? Can a heart broken that deeply open again? Ayanna looked away, blinking fast, fighting emotion she didn't want to show in public. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. When she finally spoke, her voice shook, not with weakness, but with the weight of truth. Why now, Jackson? Why come all this way? He swallowed. Because I found out the truth. Victoria set you up. All of it. Cole found evidence, witnesses. She lied, manipulated, broke everything she touched. Ayanna's breath hitched, but Jackson wasn't done. His voice grew even quieter, trembling. And there's more. Something you need to know. She hesitated. What? Ayanna reached slowly into her coat pocket and pulled out an old folder. Jackson's previous medical records. I looked again before I left, she said softly. Something didn't add up. He frowned. What do you mean? She stepped closer, handing him a page. Your test from 8 years ago, the markers aren't consistent. It may have been rushed or wrong. Jackson, there's a chance. She stopped, eyes meeting his. A chance you're not infertile at all. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. The airport noise faded. Everything froze. Jackson's chest rose sharply, breath stolen by hope so fierce it terrified him. Ayanna, he whispered, voice breaking. Are you sure? No, she answered honestly. But there's something there. Something worth looking at again. A spark ignited behind his eyes. The first spark of hope he'd felt in years. He took her hands, still kneeling, still trembling. Then let me fight for that chance, he said. For us. The drive back to Hale Ranch was quiet, except for the rattle of gravel under the truck tires. Jackson kept one hand on the wheel, the other loosely curled on his knee, still shaking from the confrontation at the airport. Ayanna sat beside him, watching the mountains rise like walls of ancient stone. When the ranch finally came into view, the atmosphere felt different, tense, heavy. Dozens of trucks lined the long dirt path, and horses were tied along the fence rails. Cowboys in worn hats stood gathered near the main barn, murmuring sharply. They were waiting, and not with kindness. Ayanna took a slow breath. Looks like they want a war. Jackson glanced at her, voice low. Then they'll get one. Inside the meeting hall, the air was thick with cigar smoke and anger. Investors in pressed suits sat alongside old ranch hands with weather-beaten faces. And standing front and center was the Morrison family, Victoria's father included, a man with enough money to shake half the county. As soon as Jackson walked in, the noise died. Victoria crossed her arms and smirked. Well, the prodigal cowboy returns, and he brings her. Ayanna stood tall beside Jackson, chin steady. She didn't hide, she didn't flinch. Jackson stepped forward. This meeting goes one way today, truth first. A wave of harsh whispers surged through the room. Mr. Morrison slammed a hand on the table. Jackson Hale, your behavior is reckless. You've humiliated our family, jeopardized a multi-million-dollar partnership, and now you bring... Enough! Jackson's voice cut clean through the hall. Silence. He turned to the crowd. I've made mistakes, but abandoning the truth won't be one of them. Ayanna watched him, feeling the weight of every word. Jackson continued. Victoria framed her. She sabotaged the lab, planted the evidence, threatened a witness, and lied to every person here. Victoria scoffed loudly. You have nothing to prove that. That was the cue. Cole, the ranch's grizzled advisor, stepped forward with a battered folder under his arm. Actually, we've got plenty. He opened it, laying photographs, statements, and timestamps onto the long wooden table. Gasps rose, whispers sharpened, faces hardened. Cole pointed to a trembling young woman near the doorway, the housemaid. She was threatened. Victoria told her to lie or she'd be fired and blacklisted. The girl nodded nervously. I'm sorry, Miss Morris. She told me I had to. Another cowboy grabbed the papers, looked them over, then glared at Victoria. You used us, used this ranch. One by one, the cowboys, men who had once respected Victoria because Jackson tolerated her, began turning. Shoulders squared, eyes narrowed. Their judgment was swift and merciless. Victoria's voice rose into a shriek. This is nonsense. You think you can choose her over everything your father built? Jackson stepped forward, stare steady as steel. I choose the truth, and I choose integrity. Money's never made a man honorable. Murmurs swelled, heads nodded, lines were being drawn. Mr. Morrison stood, face purple with rage. If you break this engagement, you'll lose every contract we control. Your ranch will suffer for years. Ayanna felt her stomach twist, but Jackson didn't waver. This ranch survived droughts, fires, and blizzards, he said calmly. It can survive without the Morrison name. A hush fell. Then a chair scraped across the floor. An old cowboy, Jed Cantrell, respected by every man on the property, stood up slowly, planting both hands on his cane. I've worked this land since your granddaddy first swung a hammer, he said to Jackson, and I'll be damned if I stand by a man who lets lies win. He nodded toward Ayanna. The girl's got courage, and she saved our wildlife program. I say we stand with her. Another cowboy stepped forward. Aye, then another, and another. The room erupted in agreement, boots stomping, hands slapping tables, voices rising in solidarity. Victoria's face drained of color. Mr. Morrison tried one last threat, but the ranch hands drowned him out. We don't want your money. Get off Hale land. We run this place with pride. Finally, Cole raised a hand. We vote. The hall went silent again. Hands lifted. Cowboys, staff, even some investors fed up with Morrison arrogance. Jackson won, overwhelmingly. Victoria's engagement contract was revoked. The business alliance shattered. And with cold finality, she was ordered to leave the ranch immediately. Her heels clicked furiously as she stormed out, rage trailing behind her like smoke. When the doors finally closed, Jackson let out a long, shaky breath. Ayanna looked at him, uncertain. He reached for her hand. This land needs honesty, he said quietly, but I need you more. And for the first time since she arrived at Hale Ranch, the room around her felt like it could, maybe, one day be home. The weeks that followed the showdown were the gentlest the ranch had seen in years. The tension faded like winter frost, replaced by the slow warmth of early summer. Hale Ranch breathed easier. Horses grazed without agitation. The wolves in the hills ventured closer, their howls no longer warnings but part of the land's natural rhythm. And in the middle of it all were Ayanna and Jackson. Two souls once bruised, now quietly healing. Every morning before sunrise, Jackson waited outside the small cabin where Ayanna stayed. He'd be leaning against the fence, hat tipped low, two horses saddled and ready. When she stepped out with her braid hanging over one shoulder and a thermos of strong coffee in her hand, he always smiled. Soft, subtle, but real. They rode across open fields while the sky blushed pink. Dew gathered on the grass. The world seemed fresh, untouched. Never thought I'd see you relax, she teased one morning. He chuckled. Never thought I'd have a reason to. Sometimes they spoke about work, her progress with the wolf pack, his plans to restore the old barns. Other times they rode in silence, letting the wind carry whatever words they didn't need to say. Little by little, the bruises inside them faded. Little by little, they began to trust the rhythm of something tender. As July approached, Jackson grew quieter. Not distant, just thoughtful. He'd watch Ayanna as she checked tracking collars or recorded animal behavior, his eyes lingering as if memorizing something fragile. One evening, Cole caught him staring and nudged his shoulder. "You're thinking too loud, boy." Jackson smirked. "That obvious. Clear as day. Whatever you're planning, don't wait too long. Good women like her don't show up twice." Jackson swallowed hard. He knew that better than anyone. A week later, the night came. The sky was a deep velvet, scattered with stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. Ayanna stepped outside after finishing notes from the day's fieldwork and saw Jackson waiting beneath the lantern at the barn door. He didn't say where they were going, just held out his hand. She smiled and took it. They rode north toward the ridge where the snow never fully melted, even in summer. The wind grew sharper as they climbed, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. Ayanna recognized the terrain, and her heart tightened. "This is where you found me," she murmured. Jackson nodded. "Figured it was right to bring you back here." The memory of that night, the blizzard, the fear, the stranger on the black horse drifted around them like ghost snow. But this time the darkness wasn't menacing. It felt like a circle finally closing. They dismounted near the rocky outcrop where the storm had nearly swallowed her. Snow glowed faintly under the moonlight, casting a silver sheen across the ridge. "Ayanna," Jackson said quietly, turning to her. His voice trembled, just a little, enough for her to notice. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. He reached into his coat but didn't pull anything out yet. "I've been walking around this ranch for years thinking everything I lost was gone for good. My father, my future, my chance to build something that mattered." Her eyes softened. "You've built more than you know, Jackson." He shook his head slowly. "Not until you came." The wind paused as if listening. Jackson lowered himself onto one knee in the snow. His breath fogged in the cold. His eyes shone like he'd finally found his place in the world. "Ayanna Neche," he said, voice breaking with emotion. "I don't need this whole mountain range. Not if you're not standing beside me." He opened his palm. In it lay a silver ring, handcrafted, carved with Apache sun and river patterns, glowing softly under the moonlight. Ayanna gasped, one hand covering her mouth. The ring wasn't just jewelry. It was respect. It was recognition. It was a promise between cultures and hearts. Jackson looked up at her. No hesitation, no fear, only love. Raw, honest, steady. "Will you marry me?" he whispered. For a moment, the world went still. Ayanna felt tears sting her eyes, hot against the cold night. She knelt down too, cupping his face with trembling hands. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Jackson, I will." He exhaled sharply, a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh, and wrapped his arms around her. Snowflakes drifted around them, catching in her hair, in his coat, in the silver ring warming between their hands. Under the great western sky, beneath ancient mountains and watching stars, two worlds finally met and chose to stay. Summer settled over Hale Ranch like a blessing. The fields glowed gold, the pines smelled sweeter, and a warm wind carried the sound of drums long before the ceremony even began. It was the first wedding the ranch had seen in decades, and nothing in its history looked quite like this. Apache and cowboy traditions blended together the way dusk blends with dawn. Gentle, seamless, meant to be. Ayanna walked down the aisle of soft earth, wearing a hand-stitched buckskin shawl adorned with turquoise beads that shimmered in the sun. Her long hair flowed freely, woven with small feathers symbolizing strength and new beginnings. Behind her, a line of women from her tribe beat slow, steady drum rhythms that echoed across the valley. Heartbeat rhythms, ancient and grounding. Jackson waited beneath a wooden arch wrapped in sage, pine boughs, and wildflowers. He wore a traditional cowboy coat but tied with an Apache sash. His black hat was pressed to his chest, and his eyes, usually sharp, usually guarded, were shining with a raw tenderness only she could pull from him. When she reached him, the entire ranch seemed to fall quiet. An Apache elder stepped forward, blessing them with smoke from burning cedar. Then the ranch's oldest cowboy, Jed Cantrell, placed a braided leather rope around their joined hands, symbolizing partnership, loyalty, and unity across cultures. Horses stamped softly behind them, as if part of the ceremony themselves. Ayanna's white mare and Jackson's black stallion stood side by side, mirroring their riders. When the elder declared them husband and wife, cheers erupted. Whoops from the cowboys, trills from the Apache women. laughter and tears mingling in the mountain air. And for a moment, Hale Ranch wasn't divided land. It was home to everyone. As night fell, a great fire was lit. Cowboys danced awkwardly beside Apache dancers, and someone's fiddle blended unexpectedly well with the drum circle. Food was passed, children chased fireflies, and stars spread across the sky like a blessing. Ayanna and Jackson slipped away for a moment, walking toward the ridge where it all began. The blizzard, the rescue, the first spark neither of them dared name. The air was cool, the fire's glow far behind them. She took his hand. "I have something to tell you." He turned and brows lifted. "Nothing bad, I hope. I'm all out of fight for today." She smiled softly. "No, something good. Something new." She placed his hand gently on her stomach. For a breath, he didn't move, didn't blink. Then everything hit him at once. His shoulders fell, his lips trembled, his breath broke. And Jackson Hale, the stoic cowboy, the man who once believed fate had stolen fatherhood from him, cried openly into his wife's hands. "Ayanna, He couldn't even finish. She didn't need him to. They held each other under the wide western sky as the world changed around them once again. Months later, the ranch welcomed its newest heir, a strong, bright-eyed baby boy. His first cry echoed through the house with the force of both his lineages, Apache courage and cowboy grit. But fate wasn't done surprising them. One crisp autumn morning, the doctor returned with a stunned expression and a chart shaking in his hand. "Jackson, Ayanna, congratulations again. You're expecting twins?" Silence. Then laughter, wild, disbelieving, joyful, broke through the kitchen, bouncing off the wooden beams like a stampede of hope. 3 children. 3 miracles for a man who once thought he'd never have even one. Jackson held Ayanna tightly, burying his face in her hair. "You gave me a family I never dreamed I could have." She whispered back, "We gave it to each other." Years later, the story of the cowboy and the Apache scientist became a quiet legend around the valley. Visitors said they could feel something sacred in the land, something older than fences, stronger than bloodlines. And whenever storms swept across the mountains, Ayanna would stand on the porch with her children and tell them, "Some storms come to destroy, but some storms come to lead us home." If this were you, lost in a storm, standing between fear and destiny, would you have followed the path that led to love,